Eleanor just discovered that, quote, joke lottery ticket is worth $100 million. After years of scraping by while Emily lived in luxury, Eleanor is now secretly richer than her entire family combined. But here's the kicker: they have no idea. They're still treating her like the broke, desperate daughter who should be grateful for scraps. Emily's texting for money. Mom's calling with fake sweetness. And Dad wants to, quote, talk about family. They smell money, and suddenly Eleanor matters again. But Eleanor? She's done playing their games. She's ready for the nuclear option. The final family dinner, the torn check, the words that will end this toxic dynasty forever. This is how you cut off the poison and save yourself. I knew that from that moment on, everything had changed. I was holding $100 million, the very lottery ticket my family had mocked. But now they were calling, suddenly, missing me, wanting to reconnect. Yeah, right. When Emily texted asking for money, I knew exactly what I had to do. The final dinner, the torn check, the words that left them speechless forever. This is how I cut the toxic and saved myself. After that fateful night when I realized I was holding a ticket worth $100 million, I refused to let myself act impulsively. I understood all too well that money could be salvation, but it could also become a trap if I wasn't careful. My whole life I had been treated as if I didn't matter, and I wasn't about to let this unexpected gift turn into a tragedy. So, the very next morning, I searched online for how to claim a jackpot safely. Every article repeated the same advice: find a lawyer and a financial advisor first. I wrote down a few names and eventually decided to contact a law firm in Manhattan known for handling large lottery cases. A few days later, I walked into a gleaming glass building, my heart pounding as the old ticket rested in my pocket. Sitting across from me in the conference room was Carol Anderson, an attorney and financial advisor with over 20 years of experience. She looked to be in her 50s, her graying hair tied neatly back, her voice firm yet warm. "The very first thing you need to understand," she said, looking me straight in the eye, "is that you must not let your family or friends know about this money until you have a plan to protect it. A sum like this will make you a target." I nodded, feeling both fearful and reassured at the same time. Over a series of meetings, Carol guided me step by step. She advised me that instead of taking yearly installments, I should opt for the lump sum, but through a trust setup in my name to keep my identity protected. She helped me assemble a team of investment professionals to create a long-term plan, part into government bonds, part into secure stocks, and a portion kept liquid as cash reserves. Every number, every clause, she explained carefully. I took notes diligently for the first time, feeling that my future was truly in my own hands, no longer dictated by anyone else. On the day I officially signed the claim, Carol stood beside me, carefully checking each document. I can still remember the feeling of the pen gliding across the contract as though I was writing a new destiny for myself. When I walked out of that building, I wasn't holding one of those oversized lottery checks you see splashed across the news, but a simple sheet of paper, a confirmation of funds. Yet, it carried the heaviest meaning. From this moment on, I was no longer the exhausted girl scraping by on late-night shifts. The very first thing I did was pay off my crushing student loans. I logged into my bank account, clicked the button to settle the full balance, and watched the screen flash the words "paid in full." Tears rolled down my cheeks again, but this time they came from pure relief. For years, I had lived under the constant shadow of debt, carefully stretching every paycheck just to make minimum payments. Now, that burden was gone. Immediately after, I submitted my resignation from the marketing firm. I thanked them sincerely for the opportunity, but inside I knew I had turned a page. My life was no longer confined to survival. It was opening into something entirely new. Still, I refused to let myself squander it. Carol reminded me over and over again that true wealth isn't about showing off, but about keeping it quiet and managing it wisely. I listened. I moved from the cramped apartment in Brooklyn to a luxury apartment in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. It was spacious, modern, with a study and a fully equipped kitchen. But I never posted it online, never bragged to anyone. Each morning, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the skyscrapers red, my heart filled with a peace I had never dared to dream of before. I made myself a promise, a clear boundary I would never break. No one in my family will ever use a single dollar of this money. They had chosen favoritism. They had chosen to abandon me. Now they would live with that choice. This money was not meant to patch up injustice nor to buy their approval. It was for me, for the future I would build, and for the people truly worthy of help. I began sketching long-term plans, setting aside a portion of the funds to support underprivileged students, those like me who once had to work themselves to exhaustion just for the chance to study. I hadn't announced anything yet, but the idea had already taken root in my heart, a way to turn my pain into hope for someone else. At night, sitting alone in my new apartment, I often thought back to the past, to the lottery ticket once dismissed as a joke. If I had thrown it away that day, I would probably still be scrubbing dishes in a diner, collapsing onto my desk with swollen eyes from sleepless nights. But life had shifted, not because of my parents' love, but because of my resilience and a strange stroke of chance they had never valued. I knew the storm wasn't over. Sooner or later, my family would realize I was no longer living in poverty. And when that day came, they would come looking, demanding, trying to cling to me. But I was ready. I had a plan. I had boundaries. And this time, I would not back down. I would protect what was mine to the very end. The months that followed, I lived a life I had once only imagined. No more fear of debt. No more draining late-night shifts. I spent my time on myself, reading, taking short courses, sometimes wandering the streets of Manhattan just to feel the pulse of the city. I kept my promise. No waste, no boasting, no letting my family know about the money. But fate always finds a way to reveal the very things we try hardest to keep hidden. One weekend morning, I decided to take my new Tesla out for a drive. I had meant to keep it in the garage and continue commuting by subway as usual, but the weather was beautiful that day, and I wanted to treat myself. I stopped at a small cafe near Central Park. To my surprise, among the customers, there was someone I recognized, Mrs. Mitchell, our old neighbor from Columbus, a woman infamous for her love of gossip. She spotted me, her face lighting up with excitement. "Eleanor, you live in New York and you're driving a Tesla. That's wonderful. You must be doing well now, aren't you?" I forced a polite smile, gave her a vague reply. But inside, I knew that this news would reach Ohio faster than any plane. Sure enough, less than a week later, my mother called. It had been ages since she last phoned me, but this time, her voice carried an uncharacteristic sweetness. "Eleanor, how have you been? I miss you so much. Your father and I were talking with Emily, and we think it's time for the family to come together again. Could you come home for a visit?" I stayed silent for a few seconds, tasting the artificiality in every word. My parents had never missed me. If not for those rumors, they would still be pretending I didn't exist. That same afternoon, I received a text from Emily. She had never once reached out to me on her own, but this time the words on my screen made me laugh bitterly. "Hey, Eleanor. I heard through the grapevine you're doing well in New York. I'm thinking of starting my own business. A boutique. I could really use some startup capital. We're sisters, right? We should help each other out." I stared at her message, remembering all the times she had mocked me for not being good enough to deserve help. And now she was the one holding out her hand. I typed back one short line, sharp as a blade and dripping with irony. "Interesting timing, Em. Funny how family bonds get stronger when money's involved." There was no reply right away, but that evening, my father called. His voice sounded stiff, forced. "Eleanor, your mother and I know that maybe in the past we weren't always fair, but you're our daughter. Family is still family. Come home this weekend for dinner, let's talk things through." I sat in my quiet apartment, listening to every word. I was no longer the child starving for praise. I had everything I needed to stand on my own. Yet still, bitterness welled up inside me. They only came to me now because they smelled money. The next day, another call came, this time from Emily herself. Her voice was all bright laughter, feigning warmth. Sis, the family is having dinner this weekend. Please come home. It's been so long since we've talked properly. I really want us to be close again. I could hear the falseness in every laugh, every word. If I were still struggling with part-time jobs and drowning in debt, would Emily ever have wanted us to be close again? I sat in silence for a long time after hanging up the phone. Old memories came rushing back. The worn-out backpack I carried at 12. The shared birthday cakes where my name was squeezed into a forgotten corner. The parties where I stood on the sidelines while Emily basked in the spotlight. I remembered my graduation day. The lottery ticket handed to me like a cruel joke. Emily's mocking smile. My mother's voice saying, "Try your luck, sweetheart." All of it crashed into me at once, leaving me breathless. And now, when luck had truly turned my life around, they suddenly came back pretending nothing had ever happened. I decided I would attend the dinner, not because I hoped for reconciliation, but because I wanted to face the truth head on. I wanted to see what they would say when confronted with an Eleanor who was no longer poor, no longer desperate for scraps of affection. I wanted to hear the words come from their own mouths so that I could end it all on my own terms. That night, while packing, my eyes fell on the old lottery ticket pressed between the pages of my journal. I brushed my fingers over the numbers, a faint smile tugging at my lips. Once they had given it to me as a sign of contempt. Now it was the very reason they pretended to miss me. I closed the journal and whispered to myself, "All right then. If they want to meet, I'll show them who Eleanor Hart is now." Later that evening, I boarded a late flight back to Columbus. On the taxi ride from the airport to Emily's house, I stared out the window at the familiar streets of my childhood blurred beneath the glow of streetlights. Every corner, every row of trees carried memories of favoritism and injustice. But this time, I wasn't the little girl waiting for scraps of love. I was coming back as someone entirely different, ready to confront them without fear. Emily's house appeared before me, a newly built mansion in a wealthy suburb. White painted walls, massive glass windows, a driveway paved with gleaming stones. Golden light poured from inside, making it look like a miniature castle. I stepped in, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. My parents stood at the entrance, their faces stretched into forced smiles. "Eleanor, you're home," my mother exclaimed, moving in for a brief hug that felt far colder than the warmth she tried to display. My father only nodded, his eyes scanning me from head to toe as if to confirm whether the rumors of my transformation were true. The dining table stood in the center of the living room, draped in pristine white linen, candles flickering, plates of steak, salad, and red wine meticulously arranged. Emily sat at the head of the table, dressed in a sparkling evening gown, her hair styled to perfection, smiling like the queen of the night. "So, you came," she said, her voice sweet yet laced with arrogance. "Sit down. We have a lot to discuss." After a few minutes of awkward small-talk questions about my work, comments about how thin I looked, endless praise for Emily's beauty and success, the conversation shifted to its true purpose. My father set his wine glass down, his voice turning firm. My father cleared his throat, trying to sound casual. "Look, Eleanor, we know you've been doing well for yourself in New York. Emily's wedding is coming up and, well, these things cost a fortune these days. We thought maybe, as a family, we could all contribute." Those words hung in the air like a blade cutting through the silence. I stared at them, feeling both bitter amusement and sorrow rise within me. All that supposed longing, all those warm invitations to come home, had been nothing more than a prelude to the real issue. Money. I set my glass down, my voice low but steady. When I was in college, who helped me when I worked 3 jobs just to pay tuition? Who stood by me? My mother faltered for a second, then quickly regained her sugary tone. "That was to make you stronger. We wanted to toughen you up." A hollow laugh escaped me. No, that wasn't training, that was abandonment. It was leaving me to fight alone while Emily had everything handed to her. The air around the table grew heavy. Emily, unable to stand the silence, cut in with her mocking tone. Emily's composure cracked. "You've always resented me, Eleanor. Even now, when you finally have something, you can't stand to share it. I never asked to be born first, to need more help. But this is what families do." they help each other. I turned to her, my eyes calm, my voice deliberate, each word sharp. I met her gaze steadily. Emily, I've been helping myself since I was 18. I paid my own way through college, found my own apartment, built my own life. What you call help, I call dependency. And what you call family, I call transaction. Emily froze, her lips trembling as if to argue, but no sound came out. My mother panicked. Eleanor, don't say that. She's still your sister. My father's brow furrowed, his hand gripping the wine glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. The entire dinner table felt frozen, as if time itself had stopped. No more laughter, no more empty pleasantries, just the harsh clatter of cutlery against plates echoing in the silence. I looked around at each face, the anger burning in my father's eyes, the unease flickering in my mother's, the humiliation etched across Emily's expression. In that moment, I felt the invisible boundary between myself and this family, as clearly as if it were carved in stone. I had crossed into another world, one they could no longer control, no longer belittle. They could try to paint the illusion of family love, but the truth was undeniable. To them, I had only ever been a tool to get what they wanted. I leaned back in my chair and gave a faint smile. I looked around the table at each of them. You want me to invest in Emily's future? Tell me. When did you invest in mine? When I was washing dishes at 2 a.m. to pay for textbooks? When I lived on ramen for months? No, because I wasn't the miracle baby. I was just Eleanor, the one who could handle anything. No one spoke another word. The grand room, bright with chandeliers, felt colder than ice, suffocating in its silence. The entire dinner table sat frozen, as though every voice had been ripped from their throats. And I knew this was only the beginning of the real confrontation, the moment where I would finally draw the line and end the long years of being belittled. I remained seated for a moment longer, glancing around at the lavish table. The flickering candles, the delicate clink of cutlery, the rich scent of expensive wine. Everything looked luxurious. Yet inside, I felt only emptiness. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a trial in disguise, staged to demand and to exploit. And I was done playing my part. I drew a deep breath and slowly stood. The chair scraped against the floor, its sharp sound cutting through the stillness, drawing every eye to me. I looked at them, my father, my mother, Emily, faces I knew so well, now distorted by disappointment and deceit. My voice rang out firm and cold. Family is not an excuse to exploit. I've endured enough. For years I stood on my own, fought on my own. What do I owe you except scars? My mother flinched, her lips trembling. Eleanor, what are you saying? We're family. You can't just turn your back. From my bag, I pulled out a blank check. The pristine paper gleamed under the lights. I placed it on the table before them. Emily's eyes lit up instantly, convinced that I would finally sign it. Finally play the obedient daughter and sister. But instead of reaching for a pen, I gripped the paper firmly and tore it to shreds. Piece after piece fluttered onto the table and floor, the sound of ripping paper slicing through the tension. I held up the torn pieces, my voice calm but final. This is my answer. You spent 23 years teaching me I wasn't worth investing in. Congratulations. The lesson stuck. The room fell into a heavy silence. Emily's face burned crimson, her eyes glaring at me in fury. She shot to her feet, screaming, "You're insane. You have all that money and you won't share. You've always been jealous of me. And now you're just taking revenge like this." My mother burst into sobs, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mom reached for me, tears streaming. "Eleanor, please. We made mistakes, but we're still family. You can't just throw that away." My father slammed his hand against the table, the wine glass rattling violently. Dad's face turned red. "Fine. If money matters more to you than family, then go. But don't come crawling back when you're alone." His voice thundered with rage. But as I looked into his eyes, I didn't see strength. I saw desperation. I looked at them one last time. My parents, broken and desperate. Emily, for once looking truly afraid. The little girl in me who had craved their love felt a pang of sadness, but the woman I'd become knew this was the only way forward. "Dad," I said quietly, turning back at the door, "I'm not alone. I'm free. There's a difference." "Behind me," Emily called out, her voice breaking. "Eleanor, wait, please." But I'd waited 23 years. I was done waiting. The heavy doors closed behind me, shutting out their cries, their tears, their anger. Outside, the night air brushed against my face, cool and liberating, carrying with it a freedom I had never known. Step by step, I felt the weight of 23 years lift from my shoulders. On the ride back to my hotel, I stared out the taxi window as the city lights streamed past. A strange mix of sorrow and relief swelled inside me. I had spent my whole life waiting for their approval, for a word of praise, for a genuine embrace. But now I understood I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need their recognition to know my worth. I spent my whole life waiting for them to acknowledge me. I whispered to myself, but now I acknowledge myself. And in that moment, I realized that cutting ties wasn't a loss. It was a beginning. I was no longer the child begging for one-sided love. I had become a free woman, and my life would be written by me, and me alone. After walking out of that family dinner, I never looked back again. Their screams, their scolding, their condemning stares, all of it remained locked behind those doors while I stepped forward onto a new path. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. And that freedom came not just from the money I had, but from the clear, resolute decision to draw a boundary with the very people who had caused me the deepest pain. I began living the life I had once only dreamed of. I traveled to the places I had longed to see but thought impossible. I stood in Paris beneath the Eiffel Tower, gazing up at the European sky. I walked the old streets of Kyoto, breathing in the scent of cherry blossoms and spring. I sat on a Hawaiian beach listening to the waves crash gently on the sand. And for the first time I felt completely at peace. Each journey was a way of healing an old wound, filling it with new radiant memories. But I didn't just travel. I learned. I enrolled in short courses on investing, languages, and art. I read more, wrote more, and allowed myself to experience what my stifled childhood had once denied me. I attended seminars, met people with the same drive, and discovered just how vast the world really was. I was no longer the small Eleanor Hart living in Emily's shadow. I had become someone else entirely strong, free, and full of aspiration. But more than anything, I chose to invest in the community. I remembered all too clearly how desperate I had once been, juggling 3 jobs just to pay tuition. I remembered the sting of watching friends with parents who supported them, while I relied only on my own hands and sleepless nights. I didn't want anyone else to go through that. So, I created a scholarship fund called Shine On, dedicated to students from struggling families who still longed to chase their dreams. I never revealed my identity when donating. I supported quietly because, for me, happiness didn't come from being praised, but from seeing others given a chance. My new life made me calmer with each passing day. I learned how to let go of expectations that no longer served me. My parents and Emily had no place in my plans anymore. They still existed somewhere back in Ohio, dealing with their own problems while I had stepped into an entirely new chapter. But life has a strange way of circling back. One late autumn afternoon, as I was strolling down Fifth Avenue in New York, I suddenly heard a familiar voice behind me. "Eleanor." I turned, and there stood Emily. She wore a designer dress, but her face looked tired, her eyes glimmering with something between envy and longing. She glanced me over at the bag on my arm, the watch on my wrist, and finally at the quiet smile on my face. You look so different," Emily said softly, her voice betraying her jealousy. "You must be so happy now, aren't you?" I smiled. No bitterness left in me, only a lightness spreading through my chest. Money doesn't define me. Freedom defines me. Emily froze, her lips parting, but no words coming out. In that moment, I saw the true distance between us. Not the distance of wealth, but of spirit. She could own everything money could buy through others, but she would never know the freedom I carried within me. I turned away and kept walking, leaving her standing there, lost in the crowd of the busy street. I no longer felt anger nor sorrow, only pity followed by release. One summer morning, I sat on the porch of the lake house I had recently bought in the suburbs of New York. It was simple, not ostentatious, but filled with light. A small garden bloomed with lavender, and a wooden deck faced out toward a deep blue lake. I brewed a hot cup of coffee, sat down in a wicker chair, and watched the water ripple under golden sunlight. Birds sang. The wind moved gently through the trees, and together they created a melody of peace, one I had never heard during my unjust childhood. I remembered it all. The worn-out gifts, the constant comparisons, the nights I cried silently, the lottery ticket dismissed with contempt, the dinner laced with mockery, and the decision to cut ties. It all felt like a film that had already ended, leaving me only with the present peaceful, free, and strong. A single phrase echoed in my mind, clear as if whispered in my ear. Cutting off the toxic isn't selfish. It's saving yourself. I took a sip of coffee and smiled. Yes, I had saved myself. I no longer needed my family's validation because I had learned to validate myself.